Okay, we'll get started. My name is David Perez. I'm the president and CEO of Phoenix. On the behalf of the employees and board of directors, I would like to welcome each of you to Huntsville, Alabama, and thank you for taking time to be here. Huntsville is located in the northern part of the state, nestled in the beautiful Tennessee Valley. The sun is shining and it's 68 degrees. I was asked to talk a little bit about Phoenix, so just for the next few minutes, I want to tell you a little bit about the background of Phoenix. Having a very modest beginning in the 50s, Phoenix has grown into the company before you today, serving nearly 900 individuals with disabilities annually, employing over 800 individuals, and serving over 12 North Alabama counties and operating in 7 states. We come together today to kick off the 75th anniversary of the National Disability Employment Month and the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We hope that Phoenix, in some small way, has been a part of all the life enhancements brought on by these events. Each year in the month of October, the nation celebrates the accomplishments of people with disabilities through a variety of events. Already this year, Phoenix has been involved with the U.S. Patriot softball game, Dr. Kenny Anderson's Second Chance radio program, and a virtual press conference, all celebrating the accomplishments of people with disabilities. We at Phoenix know the challenges facing people with disabilities, especially regarding employment, and would ask each of you to join us in our campaign for equal access. Join us this month in making sure that the voices of people with disabilities are heard and access to all parts of life is assured. If you want to know more about Phoenix and continue to be involved in our advocacy efforts, please fill out the Google form in the chat box. You can also visit us at Facebook at Huntsville at Phoenix Huntsville. I would like now to turn the program over to a past employee, past and present board member, the City of Huntsville Multicultural Affairs Officer, local celebrity, and my dear friend, Dr. Kenny Anderson. Kenny?
Thank you very much, David. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see your smiling faces. It looks like about 94 people are in the room right now, and that's pretty amazing because that represents the energy around the reason for us being together today. National Disability Employment Awareness Month gets me very excited for lots of reasons, and the fact that you're here today represents your support for the advocacy of people who have disabilities. Work that Phoenix does locally and work that is represented around our nation and even around the world. So we're just so excited to be able to convene this virtual conference today. Earlier this year, when we first started talking about following up on the success of last year's event, we were actually thinking that we would have the ability to have an in-person conference. But of course, COVID-19 has changed our world. And so I want us to also today, as we think about what we're talking about, as we listen to all the great presentations and have this tremendous opportunity to network, to be mindful of the way COVID is even now changing our world, thinking about those who've been impacted by COVID, and also be mindful, thoughtful, and prayerful about that as well. So on behalf of my role as a vice chair on the board, I am absolutely honored to have this chance to be here with you today. And I look forward to sharing some great information and hearing some great words from those who have been chosen to present today. One of those individuals is going to share with us right now, and we're going to show a video that is one of many videos that we'll highlight throughout the day, representing our Phoenix advocates. She's Shannon Green. She's a strong supporter of the program and a participant as well. And so at this time, I ask you to turn your attention to the video. And this is, of course, the first of several that you'll see today. Thank you for your participation.
My name is Shannon Green, and I've worked at Phoenix for 5 years now. I'm a badge checker on Redstone Arsenal, so I keep the building safe from any visitors that aren't welcome. Disability awareness is important to me because I think everyone needs to know that no matter what your disability or your life situation, you still can work and get out there. You don't have to stay at home or just do nothing all day.
Can you tell me how Phoenix has improved your life?
Phoenix improved my life by getting me to be able to be stable in my financial situation. So I'm actually able to get my forever home and settle down with life and enjoy.
Great. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank Good morning, everyone. I'm Shannon Green, and it is my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Congressman Jon C. Porter. Congressman Jon Porter's trademark has always been bipartisan relationship and coalition building, whether in business, policy, or politics. As a former member of the U.S. House of Representatives, he served on the powerful Committee on Ways and Means and the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and its subcommittees on aviation and rail. He was also the chairman of the Subcommittee on Federal Workforce and served as co-chairman on the Federal Workforce and served as co-chairman of the U.S. Congressional Travel and Tourism Caucus. Congressman Porter accomplished many successful projects for Nevada, including improvements in funding for aircraft traffic control, transportation, construction, and other projects. Congressman Porter got his start in public service as a city councilman before serving as a mayor, a state senator, and eventually a U.S. congressman. Quite impressive in my book. Since 2011, he has run a bipartisan government affairs and consulting firm, Porter Group. The clients he has found to be most rewarding to work with have been those with disabilities and the disability workforce world. For the past year and a half, he has had opportunity to work closely with SourceAmerica and its related nonprofits, including Phoenix, Huntsville. Congressman Porter's disability advocacy also extends to state youth programs through work with the State Youth Program Association. As a staunch advocate on issues related to employment of individuals with disabilities, the Congressman's tireless efforts to highlight how these programs offer competitive, integrative employment for individuals with disabilities comprise a deeply personal and rewarding part of his work. Welcome, Congressman Porter.
Good morning, and thank you, Sharon. I appreciate the introduction, and I must say I'm really honored to have such a great introduction, and I appreciate all of your efforts, Shannon. So thank you for all that you're doing with Phoenix Industries, and of course to my friend David. Thank you for the invitation. Appreciate it. I too really have great respect for you and Phoenix Industries, and I did a little bit of, thank goodness for the internet, right? I could do a little homework, but way back into the 50s. And yeah, I was born then, but I wasn't quite sure about the original start of Phoenix Industries, but appreciate that. To also two good friends that are on the line, that is Amy and Wes. It's been a pleasure working with you. I think one of our last meetings in person on Capitol Hill, or at least a Last Supper, was when you guys were here with us in Washington. So it's good to see you both. And actually, from Wes' perspective, you know, we've worked closely on some key legislation that I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. But just want you to know I'm honored, and you know, I'm humbled by this opportunity. And Shannon mentioned it probably better than I. I find this to be one of the most important projects that I've ever worked on, and that's helping individuals with disabilities. it's, you know, I was in office 25 plus years and have worked on a lot of projects that some were mentioned, but I'm really here, I think, really because of an organization in Nevada called Opportunity Village. And again, I think, Wes, you probably heard this story many times, but it's true. Opportunity Village, not unlike Phoenix Industries, they adopted me and they brainwashed me, and they did a pretty good job of it. I didn't realize that in my 25 years of being in office that someday I would have the opportunity to work with my friends, even today at Opportunity Village, in the world of helping individuals with disabilities and in employment, plus other areas. And here's what happened, and it really has to do with advocacy, and I will touch upon it a little bit more, but as they were brainwashing me, they would invite me to all their events as a city councilman and as a mayor of this little town, you know, in Nevada. And they made all my campaign signs and they made all my campaign buttons. And then when I was in the state Senate, they would say, "Hey, Senator, do you want to use our facilities?" Because, you know, elected office, and, you know, Nevada is a pretty big state, so is Alabama. But I had to travel 500 miles to go to my actual office. So they would say, "Hey, John, come by, use our conference room, use our phones. You need a cold glass of water, you need some lemonade. Hey, how about lunch?" So I started having town hall meetings at Opportunity Village. I still didn't grasp the full magnitude, one, of what they were doing to me, of course, but two, what was happening in the surrounds. But I was able to spend a lot of time with Opportunity Village. And then in Congress, Opportunity Village, they'd come see me and they'd invite me over and invite me to their banquets. And it really has a lot to do with me being here today. And that's because Opportunity Village really gave me this passion to want to make a difference, but also introduced me to the families that they serve, and that not unlike the families that you serve. And then I went to work, TerryFarmer, I believe, is going to be speaking here in a little while. Worked with TerryFarmer for a number of years. Again, a real champion and a hero, and has been a role model for me. So that's part of the background, separate from the public policy side. I've just had this in my heart for a long time. So again, thank you for the invitation. You know, as a politician, I could probably talk for a couple hours. Substance in 20 minutes is tough for a politician. But I'm going to talk about 3 or 4 key areas. I'll give a little bit of the political history of the ADA and where it is today. I want to talk a little bit about some of the SourceAmerica projects that we're working on that I think you may find of interest. And a little bit, as time permits, some of the political environment that we're facing here in DC and of course across the country. And then I would like to conclude by just talking about the future. What does it look like moving into 21? So I was just doing additional research and realized that there's been 31 some amendments to the ADA Act, literally since 1990. Trust me, I'm not going to walk through 31 amendments because I think you have better things to do. And you have a talented pool of speakers that know a lot more about it than I do. So as I was tracking the history, and by the way, I was able to vote in 2008 for one of those key amendments. So even from a legislative perspective, but as I was looking back in time, so, you know, colonial times, and maybe some of you are aware of this, but for those that aren't, you know, things were a lot different in many respects, from education to healthcare to transportation. But in the colonial times, it was very difficult, as today in many respects. But there was the really movement of farming out individuals that needed assistance to, you know, to maybe the farming community or where there was a place for work. So it really kind of shifted from the families a little bit, even in the 1800s, shifting into more of an institutional type of approach. And then as this institutional approach happened, and of course, the families were actually starting to mobilize politically, even in the late 1800s. But as this then shifted, into what would be more of an institutional approach from about 1920. Again, from the political perspective, we had World War I, and we had individuals coming back from the war that needed assistance and needed help and needed employment. So from about 1920 through 1960, again, there was a number of approaches to helping individuals with disabilities. And as you look back at the history, it really started as a movement. And with the ADA Act today, it didn't start in 1990, and it didn't conclude in 2019. It's a living document that it still has a lot of room for improvement. But if you look back, it really started as a movement, and it was one person at a time. It was one family at a time. It was one community at a time. And everyone really started working together, trying to get the message out. So we then went through the 20s, and then we had World War II, the Korean War, and survivors, and healthcare had improved substantially through the years, as it still is today. And that some of those challenges with survival meant that many of our loved ones, even from a military perspective and in the industrial side, and again, I'm 30 seconds away from possibly myself needing your assistance at Phoenix. But what happened was that through time, and it doesn't happen overnight, but the political movement was pretty solid. And working into the 70s, it really became a movement. And that movement was families, it was elected officials, it was the individuals themselves advocating and or lobbying. And then moving forward, were literally families licking envelopes. There was a sit-in in San Francisco for 28 some days. There was a sit-in to help passage and actually creating the regulations for the American Disabilities Act. And then moving forward, so today, we are reaping the benefits of centuries of individuals that have been giving their life and giving their commitment and their sole commitment to helping individuals with disabilities, which again brings us why we are here today, because that political process still remains available and is still one of the best means of having change happen. And it happens because of a movement, because of families, because of business. But even today, as I mentioned, we're looking at reauthorizing some of the acts of Congress that have to happen in 21. And we'll be right there firsthand working with Phoenix and all of your individuals as we're preparing really our agenda, moving into 21. So a little bit about the history again. I try to take a look at the past and bring it to the future and how that's going to impact us. Now, SourceAmerica perspective and the state use perspective, if I can just kind of give those two for a moment. So I, again, have been fortunate, and I see another board member, Barbara LeDuc's on the phone from Wisconsin, and Wes, SourceAmerica from the board. From that perspective of SourceAmerica, our role in government affairs is to collectively find information and collect input by asking our nonprofits what is happening on an everyday basis. Because again, I spent a lot of time at Opportunity Village, believe me. I've spent a lot of time with our nonprofits now that I'm with SourceAmerica across the country. But what we're trying to do at SourceAmerica is capture the hands-on perspective and like what legislation do we need to be careful of? What legislation do we need to be proactive with? And that brings me to Wes. I don't know, Wes, you remember, but I had really just left a state use program meeting in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and we had a call with SourceAmerica, and on the call was the board member. I'm going, oh my gosh, I've got to talk to one of my bosses here. And Wes explained to me the challenges, and I've been learning about the challenges of the Rule 2 and the flag industry and what was happening across the country. And we're literally driving down the highway, and of course, I was not driving. My son, Chris, was. Some may have met my son. And we were talking about the devastation that would and was starting to happen with the change in the contract. So I'm not going to get into the contract law. That's for another time. But what we had to do, and this is how advocacy and how policy making works, we analyzed the problem. And, there's, again, not a civics lessons, but there's 435 people that we have to work with, give or take, on a given day in Congress. And there's 100 or more senators. So imagine that. Talk about a bunch of egos, right? And how do we get this turned around? How do we do it rapidly? And what happens? So again, we put together a strategy working with Wes and Amy, and working with Skookum also in the West, and a number of others in California, as to, okay, what really needed to happen. So literally, we determined the problem. We determined the most influential members of Congress and the Senate, because we knew we didn't have time to go to 535 people, right? Because the clock had already started ticking. So we targeted key leadership across the country that were in a position to be able to influence the outcome. Now, in the world of politics, yes, it's as complicated as it appears. And when we're working on legislation, it's kind of like looking at a huge pizza. So imagine 121 participants this morning. Imagine 121 of us trying to decide what pizza to order, right? And I don't mean to oversimplify this, but some of you, and I hate anchovies, but some of you would like to have anchovies, and some pineapple, some pepperoni. Again, I'm being very vivid because this is how legislation works. So what we had to determine is we needed to get the fix in for the flag problem into this huge pizza that, again, you have all these competing interests, and we needed to make sure that there wasn't people out there that were fighting us, and certainly there was an element in the community that was not supportive, and across the country. So in a nutshell, what we did is we targeted, not unlike families did 100 years ago in trying to pass ADA, in 1990, we did a very similar system. We mobilized nonprofits. We met with those particular members of Congress and the Senate, and we moved forward. And we were fortunate. Halfway through it, we thought we'd lost it, right, Wes? But then we were able to get it figured out. And I am not oversimplifying, but we, with the grace of God, we had a lot of things working in our favor, and timing was good, and there was a lot of respect for Phoenix Industries and for other nonprofits across the country that were having a problem. So in essence, we worked collectively to pass the legislation. So going back in history and then moving into today, SourceAmerica, since March, we have met with over 100, and this number is moving, so don't quote me, but I think we're now up to 170 members of Congress and their staff. Believe it or not, what we did is we followed the same method that we used with the rule of two and the flags, and we learned about Zoom like really fast. And we have been literally on the phone every day since about March 20th. Meeting with members of Congress and or their staff. And of those 170 or wherever it is today, a good share of those were with members of Congress. And what we did, again, it's systematic. We invited the nonprofits across the country to be with us on the Zoom call when we talk to a member of Congress. And there are rules on what nonprofits can say or not say under guidelines. But as SourceAmerica, we're able to actually advocate and lobby on behalf of nonprofits. So we know that we have some goals going into next year. And that is, how do we encourage the federal government? On the SourceAmerica side, of course, is federal employment and state uses, just as it says, it's a state use program. There are 22 states that have those programs. But on the federal side, we're trying really hard to create a goal and the Department of Defense of a minimum of 1.5% of their business. And again, I'm oversimplifying, but we have a goal of 1.5 for Ability One type contracts that we work with. So doing that, again, not unlike 100 years ago, we have to meet with members of Congress, and a lot of people, of course, have no idea what Ability One means, and some on the phone may not understand Ability One. Our job is to understand Ability One, but we're contracted with Ability One. 160, 170 members, and here's what happens as well when it comes to legislation. You have a member of Congress may have 19 employees, give or take. A senator likely has 50 or 60, and it's by rule. I mean, they can only have so many employees. But the average age on Capitol Hill is about 26. And they're really bright, talented young people from across the country. But there's quite a turnover. So every time we go into an office, there may be a new person. So we keep going back and keep going back and keep going back. So we're working closely with SourceAmerica on a goal, a very substantial goal. Small business has guarantees. We have an encouragement by federal law. So that's really one of the primary things that we're working on. We're also working closely with ACCSES, another association in Washington, D.C. that TerryFarmer is with, and I hope Terry's on the call right now. Working closely on other legislation to recognize individuals with disabilities. So that's a little bit about what my perspective of today versus 100 years ago. And I want to take just a few moments and then open it up for questions, because again, I know the clock is ticking. We're facing some very serious times when it comes to the environment. And let's talk about the political environment for a moment. I encourage you to turn off the television, turn off your Twitter, turn off your Facebook, turn all that stuff off, right? It is challenging today for all of you, and it is for me, to understand what's true and what isn't true in the political process. What's happening with technology is we're being targeted, and a lot of times we're just being told what we want to hear. And that's one of the problems with social media, and especially when you tie that into politics. So what I'm cautioning you on is vote from your heart, but I'd do your best to ignore all the noise. Because it's tough for me, and I spend about 90 minutes every morning reading most every paper I can, major national papers, international as well. I watch CNN, I watch MSNBC, I watch Fox, I watch them all, and try to glean what I think is actually happening. So with the election, a couple of things can happen. If there's a change in the White House, Vice President Biden, assuming he becomes president, he has his own perspective on individuals with disabilities, as does President Trump. And we're not sure exactly where they're going. Either one's going to be right now on disabilities. But we do know that if there's a change in the U.S. Senate, because right now the House is controlled by Democrats, the Senate's controlled by Republicans, and the White House is Republican. And by the way, I'm a believer in split house. I think that Republicans should have one house and the Democrats the other, because then they're forced to work together a little bit. But if there's a change in the White House, if there's a change in who's in charge of the Senate, if it switches to Democrat and the White House is Democrat, we have a pretty good idea what's going to happen. And that'll be an aggressive movement on wages, on federal wages. And we really think that our work's cut out for us. Again, I am as bipartisan as there is. My job is to make it work. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. My job is to make it work, but we're watching very closely with change. So you likely will see labor law changes. And whether whoever's in the White House, there'll likely be additional changes to the Disability Act. And I really think that this pandemic and moving into the change in 21 has really forced some new technology, and it's forcing business to, I think, be more sensitive to individuals with disabilities And I think from a job perspective, I think we're going to have new doors that are opening in 21. You just take, for example, food service, or what's happening on a food, ordering it from a food app. Artificial intelligence is changing the way we do things. So watch really closely what's going to happen moving into 21. And I guess I want to leave this with the small business perspective. I'm a small business owner, and I was with the Department of Labor not too long ago, and I said, 90% of business or employment is with small businesses like mine. And we're really challenged looking for ways to be able to serve the community of individuals with disabilities. So I asked this guy at the Department of Labor, I said, so what programs do you have for small business? Because if I go through the 31 amendments that have happened, there's a lot of tax credits for large companies. But a real mission for me is to make sure that small businesses have similar incentives to hire individuals with disabilities. And the last thing, and I am going to be pushing this at SourceAmerica. So 100 years ago, and moving into the 60s and 70s, the lobbying force out there started asking self-advocates to keep a diary. And this was in the 80s. And when a self-advocate would visit a member of Congress or a local mayor or councilman or state legislator, they would bring along the diary. So I'm going to be, because of the wonderful things that I've seen happen in the world of ADA for over a century, I'm going to push really hard that we too use a similar method, that we ask our individuals, our self-advocates, to start keeping a diary. And then we'll present that to members of Congress moving forward. So I know I have a few minutes left. Again, I could talk about stuff for a long time, but I'd like to answer any questions that I can, if you have any. Otherwise, I'm here to serve. Anytime you need me, give me a call, but I'd love to answer any questions that you might have.
Hey, Congressman Porter, this is Wes. I had one question for you. What could we do just as the general public to help promote disability-related issues in our local governments?
Well, I could go back to the Opportunity Village. Again, they brainwashed me for 25 years. And it started by me as a city councilman, and then I was a mayor. And what really worked, believe it or not, is they were the purveyor of all the campaign paraphernalia, buttons, pins, signs. So I would not only go to their events, but I would go because they put together, thousands of buttons for me. And on every one of those buttons was an Opportunity Village sticker. So everywhere I went and I handed out a button, Opportunity Village smiled at me on the back of my pins as well. So it's about personal relationships. You cannot make a mistake, Wes, and I think you know that when you're talking to an elected official. And I think sometimes we get nervous, like, oh, I'm afraid of what to say or what to do. There are no mistakes. There are rules that help you with anytime you'd like. And but really it's as simple as that. It's like help on a campaign, knock on doors, hold a coffee. Right now, politicians are paying close attention to constituents. Host a tour, like I know you already do these things, but host another tour, at one of your, with some of your folks that are working. So those type of things really make it. That's why I'm here today, because of a campaign button. And that was 30 years ago. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I just want to leave you with just a quick thought. Every time that I walk into the Capitol, which was frequently until March, because I still have access to the Capitol as a former member, even in this arena of COVID-19. Every time I walk into the Capitol and I look around at the history and I think about all the men and women that gave their life for us to be here and for me to stand in the Capitol with friends and associates. I stop and think about all the challenges that we've faced and realize that there's going to be a new challenge every day, and today probably more at one time than we're accustomed to. But it's a reminder that in spite of our problems, and I encourage you to look at the great things that we've done as a country, as I do, in spite of our problems, we still are the best in the world. And an example is the world of disabilities, and the community came together and worked together to pass 31 amendments just since 1990. And it's by people working together. I think that, again, I count our blessings and honored to have the opportunity to serve, and even more so today, helping individuals with disabilities. I believe that I'm here to try to share that experience with everyone anyone would like to hear about it. So I'm very optimistic about our future. I'm optimistic about the future of our family and friends that have been touched with disabilities. And I'm optimistic that we're going to do it together, and things are going to get better every day. And I thank you again. I'm honored to be part of the program.
Thank you, Congressman Porter. Good morning. I'm Wes Tyler, Senior Vice President at Phoenix. We would like to thank Congressman Porter for participating in this event and his support for individuals with significant disabilities. Next, we will be watching one of the most important events in U.S. history. Please join me as we celebrate the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
On the day Bush signed the ADA, we convinced him that we should make it a great big celebration, since there are so many people directly affected by the passage of the ADA.
Well, it was a glorious day. July 26, 1990 was a clear blue sky. The sun was out. There were 3,000 or 4,000 people, many with disabilities and their families, on the south lawn of the White House. And the president was on a platform with leaders of the disability community to sign the bill into law.
I don't know how you describe the signing ceremony. We had people everywhere. They were on gurneys, white canes, wheelchairs, walkers, and seeing-eye dogs. I mean, any device that helped people get around was represented that day. We covered the White House lawn for sure.
The most people ever gathered on the White House lawn for a signing was July 26, 1990. Never been that many people there for a signing of a bill before. Biggest group ever in the history of this country.
I had the pleasure and the real privilege to ride to the ADA signing ceremony with John McCain. So we drove right into the White House, and then we walked outside and became part of the masses. The South Lawn was packed with people. All of them there had worked and worked and worked to see the law pass. So it was a shining day and a shining moment. And I mean, history and the weather just cooperated in a way you don't see very often.
I sat with Senator Kennedy in the 89th row back or something like that. And, you know, all the pomp and circumstance began, and we were kibitzing with each other and kind of looking over the crowd, and Kennedy leaned over to me and he said, Pat, I said, yes, Senator, I got a little problem here. And I said, what's that, Senator? He goes, what happens if he reads the bill before he signs it? I said, don't worry. I mean, the senator knew that nobody really understood the impact of what this piece of legislation was going to do.
I now lift my pen to sign this American.
And then the president ended his brief remarks with that clarion call, let the shameful wall
of
exclusion
finally
come tumbling down.
Finally come tumbling down.
And that sent a tremor through the entire crowd.
best moment was President Bush was there. He was signing the ADA. Evan Kemp was on one side. Sandy Perino was on the other side. And there was a priest, Reverend Wilkie. And he had no arms. So the president signs the legislation, and then he hands the pen. Hands the pen to Evan, hands the pen to Sandy. And then President Bush hands the pen to Reverend Wilkie with no arms. So he picks up his foot and grabs it with his toes. Like, it's the perfect moment right there.
There was a lot of pent-up emotion and anticipation in that crowd. And when the president finally put his signature on the bill, a great roar of approval went up, and it was extraordinarily special. And then the rest of the day was given over to celebration. A lot of folks who had put in years, decades, trying to reach the point that was achieved that day, let their hair down and had a lot of fun.
Just this feeling of we did it. I mean, here we were, having been told for so long how powerless we were, and here we were with the President of the United States signing this document that was our Emancipation Proclamation, essentially. It was just a fantastic feeling.
It was one of the most electric moments in time. It was like we were transported to another place. We were 20 feet off the ground. 3,000 people were 20 feet off the ground. It was like a tremendous party. A very controlled, love, respect, joy, accomplishment, satisfaction. Our time had come. We finally were recognized as citizens of the world.
I just thought of how much my brother had been discriminated against all his life because of his disability. When you see something like this and you see the president signing it, that goes through your head. You think about this, you think, well, maybe this isn't in time to help my brother, but you think about how many other people won't have to go through that, because of this. I just thought, gee, this is something that I think is going to unleash a lot of people with disabilities in this country to do things that they never thought they could do before.
I had the sense that the moment was one that I would never forget, that there was a ceremony, and the ceremony was very important, but the moment was much more than that. The moment was a recognition of the rights and abilities of people with disabilities, a recognition of respect for people with disabilities, a recognition of the end of discrimination against people with disabilities, and that the spirit of that, the feeling, whole crowd, was that in American Sign Language there's a sign for that, and the sign is it's called pa. Pa. That's how you make a sound when you sound it. Pa. And that was a pa day. That was the day that you guys saw us as your peers and not as someone who needed your help.
Good morning, everybody. On behalf of Phoenix staff and the Board of Directors, we want to thank you for attending today. At this time, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to start back at 11 o'clock. And I just want to take this opportunity to let you know that there is a Google form in the chat box, and we encourage you to fill that form out if you want to stay up to date with all of Phoenix's advocacy efforts. So again, we'll see you back at 11 o'clock.
Welcome back, and thank you for celebrating these two huge events with us this afternoon. At this time, I would like to introduce Daryl Moore. Daryl works with Phoenix in our manufacturing division, where he serves as production supervisor. Daryl has been employed at Phoenix since 2011 and is a member of our Phoenix advocacy team. As part of our advocacy team, Daryl had the opportunity to join us at the Grassroots Advocacy Conference, where we joined other congressmen like Congressman Porter, and we did grassroots advocacy. And so Daryl, in an upcoming video, will talk about that. He will talk about Phoenix, what Phoenix and the Ability One program has done for his life. At the conclusion of Daryl's video, Daryl will introduce our next two keynote speakers, CEO of ACCESS, TerryFarmer, and Thomas Buckley. At this time, please enjoy Daryl's video.
And currently I've been in Phoenix for about 8 years come this December.
What, Daryl, is your current job, and what are some of the things you do in your job and you have done at Phoenix?
Well, at this present time, I'm transitioning into a new role, which would be production manager trainee. However, prior to that, I was a line supervisor in which we made field packs for the National Forestry Department, which I helped build and assist the line and expediting that product.
Congratulations, Daryl, on your recent promotion. If you would, please tell us a little bit about your life story and how you became an employee at Phoenix.
Okay, so prior to Phoenix, I was incarcerated for about 10 years, and upon my release, it was sort of a rocky road for me. A lot of ups and downs, false promises, doors shut in my face. So for anyone who has ever went through that, I'm sure they can understand how vexing that could be. Then upon telling my probation officer about my situation, he felt the need to have me reach out to an employee of Phoenix and to see if they can help me with my situation, in which they did.
So Daryl, that's a really good story, and we're glad that you were at Phoenix. Can you tell us what Phoenix has done for you?
Well, Phoenix, for me personally, has definitely been a platform for me to at least be able to display my talents and skills, and at least help me polish them. And so far, it's been great. You know, in the 8 years I've been here, I've steadily rose to where I am now in 8 years. From a assistant line lead to supervisor to now production manager. So it's definitely been a platform for anyone, or for that matter, that wants to grow with the company, you know, so as long as they put forth the effort.
So Daryl, as being a member of the Phoenix Self-Advocacy Team, you were able to attend the SourceAmerica Grassroots Conference.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what it meant to you?
For me, that experience was great, man. I got to meet a lot of interesting people, got to know a little bit more about, you know, the disability program and everything like that. And it was a real eye-opener for me. I think it's important because it allows the public and society to be able to know just the different variations of disability and just how much an individual with a disability thrives to work and be productive in our society, work society, and workforce for that matter. Because I think for that matter, it gives a person with a disability, you know, some type of hope or reason for being, you know, instead of just, you know, I would assume just getting a check and, you know, it gives them purpose, in my opinion.
Thank you, Daryl.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
All right. As Wes said, my name is Darrell Moore, and I'd like to start by introducing Dr. Thomas Buckley. Dr. Thomas Buckley is Director of Population Health at YAI and has over 30 years experience in a national leadership capacity, including as Chair of Florida's Alzheimer Advisory Committee, a member of Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities, International Board of Directors. His specific area of expertise are supporting individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, dementia and young onset of Alzheimer's disease, and dual diagnosis of mental health and intellectual disabilities. Previously to his work at YAI, he was the director of several agencies providing support to persons with intellectual disability, including UPARC, the Pinellas County ARC, Lucanus Organization, and Buckley Medical Home. As national leader, Dr. Buckley provides consultation on various aspects of lives of persons with intellectual disabilities. For this project, he will be an administrative principal. Moving on to Mr. TerryFarmer. Terry has a BA degree in psychology from Johnson College University of Redlands, California. Following an honorable discharge from the United States Air Force, he completed 2 years of postgrad work in clinical psychology at University of Florida, including a clinical internship at Orlando Regional Medical Center. He earned a Master's of Public Administration degree from Florida State University, specializing in executive development, business administration, and political science. Terry work experience include direct services provision, behavior analyst, program administration, policy analyst, and executive level leadership in fields of disability and human services. He has administrated programs of long-term services and support diagnosis and evaluations, community placement of people with severe disabilities, mental illness, and issues advocacy. Terry accepts a position with the Florida Association of Rehabilitation Facilities in 1990. In 1991, he was appointed president and chief executive officer of this statewide public education and trade organization and serves through 2008. In that capacity, Terry was responsible for legal, legislative, and business successes that advanced funding, services growth, and employmental opportunities for persons with significant disabilities. In 2009, he co-founded Combat Injuries Project, Inc., with a group of veterans, professionals, and business execs to serve veterans, especially those with service-connected disabilities, in their families. He was appointed ACCESS President and CEO in April 2011. ACCESS is a national voice and disability service provider representing community agencies throughout the United States. Terry has been affiliated with several states and national professionals and trade organizations and has been recognized for his academic work and service to the field.
Thank you very much, Darrell. It's truly an honor for us to be with Phoenix today to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the 75th anniversary of National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Throughout this pandemic, ACCESS has been providing critical information, virtual networking, and advocacy through the COVID bills passed by Congress and signed by the President providing a variety of funding opportunities. Right now, Congress is debating the passage of a fourth COVID funding measure, and that's one of our top priorities, along with promoting Senate Resolution 679, recognizing essential employees with disabilities. You can go to access.org and click on Action Center to join with us in this advocacy. We have partnered with SourceAmerica and other national organizations to ensure that our essential workers with disabilities are properly recognized for the hard work that they have completed throughout the pandemic. We'd like to invite you to our December virtual conference, tentatively scheduled for December 15th through 17th, where we will go into a deeper dive on providing for healthcare and support of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities that Dr. Buckley will give us a brief overview of today. Tom?
Thank you very much, Terry. It's a pleasure being with everyone, and especially with the notable Phoenix organization that is CARF accredited. And I take tremendous pride in being a CARF board member and being able to participate with your noble organization. So again, just incredible work. And to have a CARF surveyor on your team is truly notable. Next slide. Today, we're going to talk about the ID healthcare, ID specialized health, and COVID-19. Can we switch to the next slide? There we go. There's no question that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are predisposed to negative outcomes. When we look at a broader scale, it's really important for us to recognize that when we have different syndromes, say Down syndrome is one example, that syndrome predisposes people to certain health conditions. So if you look at 40 years of age, 100% of people with Down syndrome have the neuropathology of Alzheimer's disease, 100%. When they actually clinically manifest, then typically it takes 2 to 3 years from onset to death, as opposed to the 15 years. So it's really critical that those of us that support people with developmental disabilities are knowledgeable of the various syndromes and healthcare conditions that come with it. But today, what I really want to talk to you about is this. My first job, I went to a United Cerebral Palsy camp in the summer. And one of the little campers in my class, birthed to 5 years of age, had seizures every day, 3 to 4 seizures. I met with her parents, and they said that she has a hole between her heart, the 2 atria, and actually she would die within 8 to 10 months. I said, yeah, but they can repair that damage. And they said, that's right, but we went to the Children's Hospital, it's $100,000. And they won't do that because Nancy has severe disabilities and is nonverbal. The outcome was we got Philadelphia Children's Hospital to perform that surgery. I adopted her at 22 years of age, single, at Philadelphia Orphans Court. Today, she lives a happy, meaningful, and engaging life in Tampa, Florida. See, you can have a long list of rights, but if somebody doesn't stand for you when those rights are being neglected, then they're meaningless. Any child that went into that hospital that day would have had that surgery in minutes. But the qualifier for Nancy was she had a developmental disability, and her life would have ended if somebody didn't stand for her. Today, I want you to remember, if you remember one thing, remember this. 50% of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, 50% will die 20 years premature due to avoidable health conditions. So I was an executive director, as they mentioned, for 25 years, but I just could not take any longer seeing people denied the health care they truly deserve or go into funerals. We had 31 group homes we designed and built that were specialized. So I dedicated my life to healthcare over the previous 2 years, just for people with developmental disabilities. Next slide. So this is our goal. It's simple. We want a just and caring society where people with developmental disabilities can age, live with dignity, purpose, and security. The goal of today and of our next training will be to increase the quality and years of healthy life. You should live your entire lifespan healthy. We can do that for every single person with a developmental disability. We're now implementing everything we designed with the Buckley Medical Home, and people are living that normal lifespan healthy because we recognize the conditions that each syndrome, again, brings with it at a specific point in their life. Next slide. So the quality of life, quality healthcare is going to require Phoenix and everybody in Alabama to come together collectively and make a commitment that it's important for each and every one of you to participate in a system that recognizes health conditions and cares for that individual to their end of life. Next slide. Now, pre-COVID, right? This is pre-COVID. Think 50% in the United States, Australia, UK died 20 years premature. But these are the conditions we're looking at. 58 times more likely to die prematurely, 3 times more likely to die of respiratory diseases. So these are actually numbers that the UK, Australia, and the US, we know exist today. Next slide. Now here's what's really important. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities die differently than people in the general population. Here's what's interesting. 34% of people with developmental disabilities die of respiratory diseases. Pre-COVID. How many do you think die in the general population of respiratory? 9%. The reason they die early is because people in residential care are now trained to identify the symptoms, complications of respiratory diseases. When they actually went and did autopsies of many of the people with developmental disabilities that died of respiratory diseases, they said that this person not only did not have a diagnosis of pneumonia, aspiration pneumonia, but it would have been almost impossible for them to breathe every day in a group home. When they talked to the staff about that, did you ever notice him gasping and choking, trying to continually clear his throat when he was eating? They said, yes, but I thought that was just his disability. So they don't recognize the respiratory disease. So again, prior to COVID is 34%. Now we introduce COVID, which is a respiratory disease. So now these numbers are exponentially going to increase. Next slide. So again, I'm just providing some of these slides so you actually have it as a backdrop if people were to ask questions. Next slide. So YI is an organization here in New York City that I came to implement with healthcare. Why YI? YI is a very large organization, $260 million, 20,000 people with developmental disabilities. But the key is YI has 5 incredible clinics. The clinics, each clinic in the 5 boroughs has psychiatrists, neurologists, ophthalmologists, pediatricians, therapists, and dentists, and they follow them throughout the person's life, right? So we have great historians and data on each individual. Next slide. So does COVID present a unique risk to people with developmental disabilities? Absolutely. We know now in New York, which is the first place that got hit by COVID, that 9.5% died from COVID-19 with developmental disabilities. That's a death rate 2.5 times higher than the death rate for the state of New York overall. So without question, people are predisposed. We recognize that when we looked at the death, often people had multiple comorbid health conditions. So the people with developmental disabilities have an increase in comorbid health conditions? Yes. At 40 years of age now, 90% of people with Down syndrome have 4.5 health conditions, 4.5. So at 40, you're already aging, right? We know 100% have the neuropathology of Alzheimer's. If an individual that's 40, 45 years of age with Down syndrome contracts COVID-19, that's going to be deadly to them. Now today, it doesn't matter to me what your party is, right? Republican, Democrat, they politicize this. People ask me what party I'm with. I just tell them I'm here presenting healthcare, Alzheimer's disease, and COVID-19, right? It's not important what party. This is what I can tell you though. When President Trump or others talk about COVID and whether it's not a risk or not, or should you ignore it, we always have to keep in mind they're talking about the general population, right? People that are healthy, typically no comorbid health conditions. But that's not who we're talking about. We're talking about people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. That's what we're talking about. COVID-19 can be deadly. I've worked since March. I developed a respiratory infection mitigation framework of everything an agency should do and presented the first webinar in the country with TerryFarmer and ACCSES. It breaks my heart that agencies have contacted me that they did not wear a mask. They did not wear gloves. And 6 of the 8 people in that home died. Should that have happened? Absolutely not. Did we present March 12th? You have to social distance. You have to wear the mask. It's deadly. Yes, we did. What about staff? The number of staff that have died, people that are the kindest, gentlest, honest, sincere people you ever meet in your world, dedicate their life to people with developmental disabilities, but they had comorbid health conditions. They wouldn't leave them alone. They stayed right there and they died as a result, along with the person with a developmental disability. So when politicians, agency administrators, and others say the mask isn't important, PPE isn't important, you need to stand up the same way I stood up for Nancy and said, no, that's not right. In the general population, or if you have people that are healthy that want to make that decision, that's okay, you can do that. But not for people with intellectual and developmental disability with health conditions. Next slide. So the first time that in New York, right, we didn't even know we had COVID. So my daughter's a plastic surgeon here in New York. She's like, Dad, there's hundreds of people in the hospital now, sick, something's wrong. And so we noticed here at YI where people were getting very sick. Now, this is before they even talked about COVID. We knew something was very wrong here in New York. We now went through the COVID experience. We're now ramping up for a second wave, right? Or you never came out of the first wave. But going into the numbers now, again, exponentially increasing, you're not going to have an excuse as a provider or agencies across the country that we don't know how to protect ourselves or others with COVID. This is a newspaper article now in New York City for the New York Times that they're writing about the number of people that died within group homes and twice as likely to die than the general population. So again, the stories are out there. Now people are going to be on hold. I've been contacted by 8 different attorneys. I'm an expert witness in lawsuits. 8 attorneys on the plaintiff side to file the lawsuits against agencies, ID agencies, where people have died on behalf of the family. So we need to prepare to defend yourselves, to protect your family, and to ensure the health and safety of the individuals we serve. Next slide. So again, it's important, like with HHS, they now have COVID-19 individual, and it actually gives you the process that you need to go through if they test negative positive. None of these charts or flow charts were present initially, but they are now. So it's important to be familiar with these. Next. And again, I'm going through these fairly quickly, but Wes will have the entire PowerPoint, which really breaks it down. And then obviously for Phoenix and others in Alabama, you can choose to implement what you wish. In England, where the government was sued by a number of people with developmental disabilities, like we talked about, that died 20 years premature, they actually set up a governmental agency that looks at every single autopsy of a person with a developmental disability to determine if it was premature, if it was avoidable. They now come out with this risk assessment for people with ID, saying that without question, they are much more predisposed to negative consequences, especially if they have mental health, epilepsy, and comorbidity. So again, this is codified now. So when you're looking at a person with an ID, if they're 20 years of age with no health conditions versus persons that we've identified with comorbidity, you can actually assess the risk. So if a person has no health conditions, right, that person can go back to the day program in the community much quicker than somebody else that presents with health conditions. But again, this is pretty extensive. It's an incredible journal article that England, the UK put together just for guidance for agencies with people with ID and COVID-19. So I'll give that article also to Wes. Next slide. So what we did is we said here at YI, but also for ACCSES, if you set up within your agency a respiratory infection mitigation framework that was best practice, state of the art, what would that be? Right? So you'd create a hospital passport. So a hospital passport is for somebody that needs to go to the hospital, say in the next 20 minutes. The passport would go with them. So that would tell the doctors, nurses, all their medications, all their health conditions. It would tell them they may be nonverbal, what their preferences are, and other things, who to contact. Secondly, obviously, train and educate staff just with COVID-19, and we have that program in place right now. We developed a COVID-19 risk assessment. I developed that for YAI and others. So again, if you were looking to say we can have 50% of the people we serve back in the day program, who should go? That's correct. Then the risk assessment will do that for you. It'll identify these 25 people are no different than the general population, should be able to go to your day program. However, for these 20 people in your homes, it really poses a tremendous risk. So in the UK, it's considered an extreme risk of a negative consequence, and ultimately, obviously, death. So they're the individuals that we do not want to have integrate back in. That would be if a person had aspiration pneumonia or pneumonia 6 months ago, if they just came through COVID, that's an individual that you would not want to have going back to their job or to your day program. It's pretty stark when you think at YI, we have 180 homes. So we're doing a positive antibody test for everybody. So when you wonder how many people in our homes in New York test positive, what would you think? 5, maybe 10%, right? Typically it's 5% have COVID. 75 to 80%. 75% of the residents here. So when COVID hit New York, it hit New York and nobody knew it was here. In a silent manner, it moved throughout these neighborhoods and boroughs. In Queens, 50% of the people in the general population test positive. So it took 32,000 New Yorkers. So when people tell you COVID-19 isn't serious, tell the 32,000 people that died in New York from COVID-19. We're better at treatments today. I agree with that, but it's still deadly if as staff, we don't identify it in our homes and day programs, and then obviously get that person the care they need. Next slide. And again, all of these will be broken down. So the hospital passport, I have 3 examples of that. So they actually gave grants, developed great ones just for people with ID. Next. So for the staff, it's really critical. This is the single most important thing I would do right away if you're in Alabama, is that there are red flags that we know just for people with ID that our staff should be aware of. So for your staff that go out to people that are employed in the community for day programs, for group homes, these red flags are critical for your staff to be able to identify in a timely manner. Next. Staff education and training, we've gone into great lengths, and now we have dramatically reduced hospitalization or any negative consequences for people that are still contracting COVID-19 here in New York due to strictly education and training. But again, back to what David said earlier, if you have the PPE, you can dramatically reduce COVID. But I always tell people, you look at the NHL or the NBA, 4,000 athletes and not one got COVID in that bubble. That's right. We can prevent it. There was contact every day between those athletes. But PPE can prevent the spread. That's what we need to do for the people that we serve. Next slide. So this is the risk assessment I was telling you about. Again, I'll make sure Wes has that. It's really easy to just go right down that scale. So if you have the day program or residential, we go through that for every single person, assess it. Now, what happens if somebody's extremely vulnerable and family members of that person says they still want to go to your day program or to a setting or work in a community? So my recommendation is to document that in the care plan, that as a group, even though you've determined this is going to pose an extreme risk for this individual, for a negative outcome, that the family and that person served feels is critical that they go back to the part-time job or the day program, document that, and then obviously implementing PPE, but you can never, with every single person, obviously prevent. Next. So these are the red flags we talk about. So I would post this in your program so that people can continually look at it and become familiar. So there are so many signs, like we were saying early on, I'm going to say probably late January, early February, before the country even recognized COVID-19, we had people that had gastrointestinal problems, and they thought we had a stomach flu running through the homes with our clinics. It was COVID-19. We've gone back and tested. So it's critical that you really become familiar with all of these symptoms. Next slide. And again, you can see that's specific just for ID. This is a COVID-19 plan of care. And again, we'll send that to you if you'd like to have that. So my recommendation is if you have a life plan, support plan, whatever it may be in your state, you simply add another paragraph or two discussing that this individual contracted COVID-19, we had extreme behaviors with the restrictions or with their hospitalization, and this is our recommendation going forward. Or the person is vulnerable, did not contract COVID-19. All of that needs to be documented to really cover your agency going forward, especially, it's sad, but people are going to take advantage of agencies. And even though we were all facing COVID-19 at the same time, to think that the attorneys on the plaintiff side that I've done cases for, I do plaintiff and defense, when I'm talking to them and they say, well, Dr. Buckley, we actually had 3 persons that died. We had 6 staff persons that were hospitalized, and the suits being filed on behalf of all of them. And the agency had no idea that they're even going to file these lawsuits. Would you be our expert? And obviously I said, no, I'm not comfortable. How could the agency have possibly known or responded, right, when we didn't even know COVID-19 was there? So again, it's really incumbent upon all of us for risk management to make sure that we're documenting everything that we do in the plan of care. Next slide. So I just referenced here, and you can go pull it up, but the CDC actually requires, like in nursing homes, ALFs, that a plan of care be developed and implemented for people that are vulnerable for COVID. So is that the case in the IDD world? No. And that's one of the problems you have when you look at a state. They don't implement based on what the federal government's requiring. So all these agencies in a lawsuit, they're going to say, did you document that? Did you do a COVID plan of care like the CDC required of ALFs and others? They're going to say no. So I would definitely make sure either, like I said, we have a 2-page COVID-19 plan of care that I developed, or just document in your care plan, especially since CDC requires it. Next slide. Definitely we want to involve the families and caregivers. So many feel that they were alienated, isolated, alone, could not visit their loved one in the group homes for months here in New York and with other states. So they're desperate to really be involved now. And looking at a second wave, we want them involved in every aspect and preparing for a second wave. Next slide. Social distancing, obviously we're very familiar with this, but implementing social distancing in your day programs will absolutely be critical. Next slide. Mental health and challenging behaviors was obviously a huge issue for us. The one thing I would recommend is this. For people with Alzheimer's disease, and we have over 100 people with Alzheimer's disease here, but FDA prohibits psychotropic medications for anybody with Alzheimer's disease, right? It's lethal. So before you would ever look and recommend a psychotropic medication for an individual, I would really deal with the circumstances of the restrictions, the isolation, loneliness. Next slide. Again, we go on about more recommendations with what we've learned and put into place, and it's been successful with behavior support plans addressing COVID. Next slide. And finally, your ceiling of care for treatment. So if somebody has COVID or they're sick, when the symptoms progress, at what point in time should the staff call 911? Should the staff call the hospital or doctor? So somebody that's 21 years of age working in a group home as a direct support professional, they're not going to have the expertise to make these calls. So again, it's really important to say if the person's temperature reaches X degrees, at that point in time, it's critical to reach out to our nurses, doctors, and others. Next slide. And finally, PPE. So we have gone to great lengths right now to actually store several months of PPE for a second wave that'll come in the winter up here. And we're already experiencing that now in New Jersey and New York, has again increased now back to 5 to 8% from 0.8%. So we're on a dramatic rise, and it's going to be very difficult finding PPE in the future. So thank you very much for your time. Again, all of these documents, we've gone to much greater lengths preparing to safeguard the individuals we serve. And I'll send all of that along with the research to Wes so that he can disseminate that to you. So thanks again, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you, Terry and Thomas, for that information and for sharing your time with us. My name is Amy Patterson, and I'm Vice President of Vocational Programs here at Phoenix. Senator Tom Harkin sponsored the Americans with Disabilities Act 30 years ago. Through the video that we're about to show, you will learn of his passion for the passing of this piece of legislation and his challenge to employers around hiring individuals with disabilities. Now we will play a message from former Senator Harkin highlighting the 30th anniversary of the ADA.
Hi, I'm retired Senator Tom Harkin. On July the 26th of this year, our country is celebrating 30 years of commitment to creating equal opportunities for individuals living with disabilities through the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. A lot of times people ask me, what was my motivation for sponsoring the Americans with Disabilities Act? Well, I grew up with a brother, my brother Frank, who became deaf at around between 5 and 6 years of age. He was taken from his home, sent halfway across the state to a school for the deaf, and it was called the School for the Deaf and Dumb in those days. As my brother once said to me, I may be deaf, but I'm not dumb. But that's the kind of hurtful language that people used. And then I saw later on in life how he was discriminated against in so many ways, simply because he was deaf. And so I thought, well, if I ever had a chance to do something about it, I would. For a person with a disability, it was a life of segregation and separation from their family and their friends, and their community. It was a life of hurtful language that you would hear all the time. And it was a life, even among the most well-meaning of people, it was a life of pity and patronizing attitudes. Life was limiting in so many ways to a person with a disability before the ADA. A lot of times people ask me, you know, who were your partners in getting this done? Well, the biggest force really behind the ADA were persons with disabilities. In the late 70s and 80s, they would start laying down behind the wheels, under the wheels of Greyhound buses, because they couldn't get on a bus. There was the famous Capitol crawl when people fell out of their wheelchairs and crawled up the steps of the US Capitol because that was the only way they could get in. To illustrate, they were just this creative nonviolence that they engaged in brought to the conscience of America that things needed to change. And this all came to a head in the late 80s when I was in the Senate. And we had bipartisan support. This was a bipartisan effort. I remember when the bill passed the Senate floor, being the chief sponsor, I was leading the effort on the Senate floor, and I gave my speech in sign language. And I remember this caused quite a stir on the Senate floor, because as you know, there's a reporter that takes down everything that's said on the Senate floor. Well, the reporter didn't understand sign language. The senator sitting in the chair that was in charge of the Senate floor was Senator Bob Kerrey from Nebraska. He didn't know what to do either because he didn't understand sign language. So I remarked, well, now you know what a deaf person feels like when all they see are verbal communications, and they can't understand verbal communications. But I had to go back and give my speech verbally also. But I hope it brought home to people kind of what we're talking about, and that is accessibility. You see, there are 4 goals of the Americans with Disabilities Act: full participation, equal opportunity, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency. So in 30 years, we kind of look back and think, well, how have we done? Well, on the first 3, we've made some progress. We have more participation in all aspects of society by persons with disabilities, and especially by what I call the ADA generation. The ADA generation, those with disabilities born after 1990, has grown up under the ADA, where access and inclusion are the norm, not an exception. These children and young adults and their parents expect to have integrated classrooms, to be cared for by local doctors, and to be hired without discrimination. It's no longer enough to rise to the level of accommodation outlined in the ADA. Accommodations are the minimum. We're now in an age where full inclusion is expected. But it's in that last goal, economic self-sufficiency, where we really have not kept up and we haven't made much advance. When I retired from the Senate, I decided to focus my energies and efforts in that area. And to that end, we have started what's called Harkin Summits, and you can look it up, harkinsummit.org. The goal of those is simply to get the private sector to commit to doing more. In 2017, I challenged the broad private sector to set a goal that in the next 10 years,
they would double the rate of employment of persons with disabilities. Whether you are a small business hardware store, a dry cleaner, or ice cream shop, pledge to hire your first employee with a disability. If you already employ a worker with a disability, pledge to double the number and to consider advancement for your current employees with disabilities. If you are a big business like American Airlines or Microsoft or Home Depot, you should have an aggressive hiring plan to recruit, hire, train, retain, and advance workers with disabilities. And finally, I encourage you to work with this new, young ADA generation. They are a marvel to behold. They're smart, they're engaged, and they're ready to make the world their own. Small changes by those on Main Street and big changes by those on Wall Street can make the goal of economic self-sufficiency for people with disabilities a reality. Make that pledge now on behalf of the 30th anniversary of the ADA. If we all do this, then 30 years from now, we can say with pride that everyone in America, every person with a disability, has access to the same rights, the same dreams, and the same opportunities as everyone else to make those dreams come true.
Good morning. My name is Samantha Boyer, and I'm a case manager at Phoenix, and I have the great pleasure of introducing our next speaker. Jennifer Middleton is an award-winning sales director with a career of over 24 years in the hospitality industry. She is a University of Alabama graduate who has been in her current role as Director of Sales for the Candlewood Suite since 2015. Jennifer is passionate about sharing hospitality careers and strongly believes that the hospitality industry has a job for everyone. Jennifer is also an award winner because of her work to advocate for people with disabilities. Over the past 4 years, Jennifer has helped students with disabilities participate in our Phoenix JETS program, offered her hotel as a site for our assessments, and also offered multiple employment opportunities for people with disabilities. This past summer alone, Jennifer was the sole reason that we were able to have our JETS program in the midst of this coronavirus pandemic. She is such a gem for our community, and I'm so thankful for what all she's done for Phoenix and our consumers. So, welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Great. So, wow, what a difference 30 years makes. And it starts the conversation today with the benefits of hiring individuals with disabilities. And the first thing I want to address when talking about that is, again, my passion for the hospitality industry and something that I've discovered after working with Phoenix over the past few years. And that is that what some folks consider a disability in my world is actually a special ability. And I hope that you all can gather some of this information, and when you're out presenting opportunities to businesses in the community, that you can use some of these talking points to get more opportunities for all these wonderful people with special abilities. And with that, that brings me to the JETS program and how we have benefited as a business from working with them. So let's talk about some things that people may have that are considered a disability that I consider a special ability. Things like autism or Asperger's or obsessive compulsive disorder or anxiety or depression. Some things that, and then of course there's physical. You may be wheelchair bound, you may be hearing impaired. And that is something that my eyes have been open to over the past few years. When my dad came to me, and my dad works for Phoenix, so if Daddy needs something, I'm going to say yes. So that was our first year, and we were fortunate enough to have a few students that were hearing impaired. And that got me to thinking, in the hospitality industry, we tend to be a motley crew. And some of our work is easier and harder than others when you're working with the public and trying to please the public I don't know if y'all know this, but that can be a little bit hard. So one of the things that I also know is that sometimes in departments you can have some negativity. And for some reason, when I first got here, there was a little negativity in that housekeeping department. And I decided after I experienced time with our JET students that it would be absolutely perfect if I had some hearing impaired housekeepers. And I thought that it might change the environment and the climate of the hotel. And so what a blessing that was, because I mean, from day one, we saw that our folks that tended to be negative were more helpful. They were more positive. There was an environment of teamwork. I mean, who's not going to help someone that is hearing impaired? I mean, who's not going to help someone that they know has OCD or anxiety? So I'm going to call her Sally. And when we reached out to the Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services, I didn't even know that you could get interpreters to come and help you with sign language for training and such. So what turned out to be me helping them actually turned out that Phoenix was helping us. So those benefits, and I'm not even going to talk about money because that messes everything up. But we all know that there's also financial benefits from hiring people with disabilities. But our benefits have been so great, we haven't even got to that yet. We had one student that had OCD and anxiety. And what, again, some people would consider that a disability, in our laundry department, we had never had such organization. She would have lists of what housekeepers needed and have it delivered to them before they could even come down and miss it. And everything in laundry and housekeeping never ran so smoothly. So now we've got a hearing impaired housekeeper that has created increased sensitivity among all departments. And then we have a student who has OCD and anxiety, but that just pushes her to be extraordinarily organized and really attentive to detail. And everybody appreciated that so much that it just turned into an extremely positive work environment and carried us to the next level as a business, because our guests certainly recognize that we are open to accepting all people. It's amazing how many people will come and talk to you about situations they have in their own personal life with either family members or friends' children, that you can open the door for them and let them understand how to approach opportunities and get people in the door. So having an environment that's more patient, more kind, a work family is the incredible benefit that we've had. And then the other thing that has done in my career is that being around these folks has helped me learn how to work and do a better job serving these folks. So I was able to secure overflow from a conference that sold my hotel out, was the Southeastern Regional Conference for Deaf. And because I was already in that world, when I made the phone call and said, we're set up better than anyone else to host these folks, they were like, of course. So then every good thing leads to another. When I was welcoming these folks to check into the hotel and they were noticing that we had a hearing impaired housekeeper, or they were talking to me about it, and I was able to start a conversation, which was extremely natural. It wasn't forced, it was natural. I was checking them in, chatting them up. The next thing I know, they asked me if they can use me as an example because they're a speaker at that conference. Well, of course, I mean, that's something that we're doing to help others that has turned around into promotion for my hotel, simply from doing the right thing. So I know that I don't have a whole lot of time, but I hope that I've been able today to show you that in 30 years, we've come an awful long way, and I probably should get with some of you guys and write a book, because the benefits of hiring people with special abilities is so, all it is thinking outside the box and making it happen, because it absolutely will feed your soul and benefit you way more than you benefit them. So that's what I end with, is that I welcome anyone, please, to reach out to me. I've gained so many resources, so now I know exactly who to call if I need some help for someone, if I need an interpreter, if I need something. Like, I have a whole pool of work candidates that I would never have. And in this day and age, workforce is our biggest challenge. We cannot find enough employees to fill the jobs, and we are leaving a whole list of amazing candidates off the list if we don't call our partners with Phoenix, Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services, ACCSES, the rest. Reach out when you have a job, because the other thing that is an incredible benefit, and I'm going to finish with this. When we got our hearing impaired housekeeper, and I'm going to call her Sally, she didn't have a car, she lived with a friend, and she depended on her for a ride. In 2 years, she now has her own car, her own place, is completely independent, self-sufficient, and is a veteran in our housekeeping department. So with that final success story, I welcome any questions. I hope that if you have any questions, that you will reach out to me personally after this call, and please share my information with anyone that's interested.
Thank you, Jennifer. What a great story. I would like to conclude today's program with 3 short videos from 3 longtime employees, each working in a different Phoenix job, each having taken a different career path, and each overcoming different challenges, but all being part of the Phoenix family and all serving on the Phoenix Advocacy Committee. So it is my privilege to introduce 3 employees and 3 friends who I've known a long time, who again work in very different areas, but have a message for each of you. May I introduce to you Martha Jo Smith, William Cheeks, and Brian Sarkeesian on video through Zoom.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you, Martha?
I'm fine. My name is Martha Jo Smith. I have worked for Phoenix for 16 years. I am a receptionist, a security receptionist on a desk at Redstone Arsenal. I check people in and out. I look up lists to see if someone can be allowed in the building. Workmen come through, anything of that nature. Someone in the building needs me to contact them, and so forth and so on. It's busy, but it's good. Phoenix, let me step back. I had a job, but because I walked with a cane and couldn't pick up things with 2 hands, I lost that job, although they knew I walked with a cane. I went to Alabama unemployment. They took me to the rehabilitation counselor, and she began to work with me. And she sent me to Phoenix. I came down, I filled out the paperwork, and then the next day they called me to interview for a job, and I went, and I had the job. It was 4 hours a day, then I got up to 6, and then I went to 8. The whole time I'm learning on the computer, all sorts of things, even getting a security clearance, which is really good to have in this town. So what I want to emphasize to you is you're just that far away from being me. Your children could be that far away. A loved one, a friend, that far away, one accident away, one illness away from being me and needing help to get a job and support yourself and feel pride in yourself. So please celebrate with us and work with us. Thanks.
Thank you, Martha Jo.
You're welcome.
How's it going? My name is William Cheeks. I'm administrative assistant at Phoenix. I've been administrative assistant for 20 plus years. And at this time, we're celebrating National Disability Awareness Month. And for me, that actually changed my life, because I didn't know a lot about disability, so I came here Actually, I understand how it works with disabilities. There's all kinds, so many kinds. It take me days to mention those. And as I say, we're celebrating Disability Awareness Month this month, and we like others to celebrate with us. For me, it changed my life. Gave me something to do, a purpose, an income, being what's that citizen? Taxpaying citizen and things of that nature. And what I want the month to possibly do as far as this business is to get the awareness out of how important persons with disabilities having to work and doing things for themselves. Like I said, I don't know. I done went from, drawing Social Security check to actually own a house, car, dog, all that good stuff, fence. So, and from dealing with persons with disability, I know they would rather try something to be told they couldn't do something, because it's like me, I can be stubborn, because I'd rather try it myself than get help. So that's all that we try to get out of Phoenix, is the fact that persons with disabilities are real important to themselves and to the well-being of others if they're given a chance. So I don't know. I get a little emotional with this, but like I said, thanks again for celebrating this month with us, and let's see if we can't get through this thing together. Thank you.
Hey, my name is Brian Sarkeesian.
Okay, Brian, how long have you been with Phoenix?
I have been with Phoenix for over 10 years.
And tell me what you do with Phoenix.
I am a custodian for Phoenix. I clean government buildings on Redstone Arsenal.
And you enjoy it?
Oh, I do. It's great. You get to meet people and see really friendly faces and learn a lot from them.
Awesome. Okay, what has Phoenix done for you? How do you feel like you've benefited from employment with Phoenix?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, a lot of things. For starters, but Phoenix has gave me the opportunity to gain employment with a decent salary, so I can pay my bills and enjoy life like I really want to. It has helped me to work with different people and understand people with different personalities, as well as it's helped me to gain the confidence to pursue my goals and dreams.
Awesome. Why do you think it is important to celebrate Disability Employment Awareness Month?
Yeah, that is a great question. Okay, here it is. It is important to recognize people with disabilities and the great talents they may have and what they may bring to employers. Everybody has goals and dreams that they want to accomplish, and it is important that everybody has an opportunity to do so, whether they have a disability or not. What one person may lack, they may be great at something else. For example, let's say somebody has comprehension problems, they may have a very difficult time with jobs or tasks like computers or something that require a lot of thinking. But they may be amazing at speaking, cleaning, cutting trees, and physical work. But there may be another group of people who have a hard time with social skills, but just be great at computer work, mechanics, or other jobs that are behind the scenes. Okay, if employers are aware of disabilities, then we may be able to embrace them and plug people with disabilities at the right places, as well as people without disabilities be put in the best jobs that they may excel the best at. I believe both companies and people would thrive, and people with disabilities would become more successful at accomplishing their goals and dreams. This is why it is important to celebrate and recognize National Disability Employment Awareness Month.
Thank you, Brian.
Wow. I want to tell you a little bit about these three individuals. Not only do they have jobs, when COVID hit, they were front line. They were out front. There were a lot of things that had to be done, and these individuals were three of the individuals who did not go home, who spent their time keeping Redstone Arsenal clean, keeping a safe and healthy environment, and managing our front desk. And they also are members of the Phoenix Advocacy Committee support group. This is a group that these three individuals have traveled to Washington, D.C. to tell their story. So not only do they work for Phoenix, they engage in advocacy efforts to continue the challenges that Phoenix sees and people with disabilities encounter. And I want to thank each one of them. If you're online, I know Brian's out there, so thank you, Brian. And if William and Martha Jo are listening, I want to thank them for their contribution today and also their continuing efforts. So this really concludes a wonderfully productive day and very informational. And I want to thank each and every one of you for attending. Now comes the hard part. I'm going to try to thank everybody that I saw. So the first person that I want to thank, or organization, is the Redstone Arsenal Garrison and all of our customers. I talked with Colonel Kelsey Smith, the outgoing base commander, and thank them for all of their support. Huntsville Madison County United Way. I saw Kathy out there. SourceAmerica, a plus 50-year partner, the Alabama Department of Rehab Services. I saw Micah and Tina out there. Our fellow rehabilitation providers in the state of Alabama. I saw Lynn. I want to thank each of those folks. Our guest speakers today, John, Terry, Tom, and Jennifer. Thank you so much. The Phoenix Board of Directors, of which one is attending today, is Mr. Earl South, who was a founding board member of this organization, and he still serves on the Phoenix board. I see two of my children are out there, Pat and Courtney. Thank you for joining us today. And I always take this opportunity to do a little personal business. So Pat and Courtney, thank you for being out there. But most importantly, I want to thank all of the employees and program consumers, past and present, for without them, there would be no Phoenix. And the number today is 800, but the number is thousands if you talk about all of the different individuals that have had a relationship with Phoenix, and I want to thank each and every one of them. And remember, if you want to know more about Phoenix and continue to be involved in our advocacy efforts, please fill out the Google form in the chat box or visit us on our Facebook page, Phoenix Huntsville. And I want to conclude with this one statement. Always remember, no matter the adversity, with opportunity and choice, ability will always triumph. Thank you all.